26-player registration 326B. A small village around 80 kilometers to the east of Seville seemed an unlikely birthplace for one of the greatest footballing talents the world has ever seen, but then again Pelé was born in Town of Three Hearts, hardly within earshot of the Maracana. Yet that was where Sergio Castro spent his formative years, a happy enough child kicking a ball around the dusty pitches of mid-80s Andalusia. As good a backdrop as any for a kid with dreams and aspirations to have football take him away from the charming yet listless village that offered him a comfortable and loving home. But there was tons of kids in the village who were decent with the ball at their feet. The Spanish automatically believed that their defining moments with the ball were similar to those of a matador coming in for the kill. Entertainment was what the players wanted to offer. Often when players become famous, TV stations love to return to their hometowns and interview excitable PE teachers who claimed that they spotted that raw talent, but in Castro's case he passed all of them by. Nothing was standout about him in primary, indeed, his oversized frame and girth made him seem like more of gangling clown than a cultured striker. It was as if young Sergio had undergone an ugly duckling phase, from which he awoke one fine morning aged 12 and with his laces tied. In a short space of time, the lad who was picked last for 5A side was tearing through defenses and causing a stir at junior level. That aroused the interest of one of the two big sides in the city, Andalusia Red, to offer him a place at their academy. There, his progress did not go unremarked upon, and eventually a more enticing offer came along. Many miles away from Seville, the less successful outfit in Liverpool, Merseyside Blue was undergoing a complete overhaul since the installation of the Japanese manager, Yobakishi Kawabata, in his tenure, with a series of revolutionary ideas to invigorate and enliven the youth set up at the club, with an aim to reducing transfer fees paid to bring new players in, and fetching a hefty fee for those who were sold on. Part of Kawabata's dream was to bring in an elite group of teenagers and have them immersed in his footballing philosophy, an ethos that transcended merely kicking a ball. He wanted the club to be a pivotal part of the players' lives and instill a level of discipline and dedication in them that would aid them in their adult lives. The idea was to take 4 players from diverse backgrounds and bring them to the club, along with their families, to start a new life that would hopefully, in his view, create world-class footballers and upstanding individuals. He had one from Iceland, Haldor Sigurdsson, one from Lithuania, Vinclaus Vinclova, and one from Italy, Italo Manzoni. Kawabata needed a Spanish player to complete his set but could not find one that fitted his ideal criteria: late developer, no or very little English, working class and humble origins. It was only when MB's star striker Nicolas Cavanagh married the Spanish actress Mar Rodriguez did Kawabata find his man. Castro was Rodriguez's cousin and had managed to all under the MB radar whilst the project was in its initial phase, as the club's performances on the pitches required more of the Japanese genius's input. As MB improved, more time could be dedicated to his vision. The Castro family were somewhat reluctant to take the side up on its offer at first. They considered that he had just as much of a chance as making it with Andalusia Red, maybe even more so than uprooting the entire family and emigrating. Yet somehow they were convinced, and Castro signed as a 14-year-old. This was in March of 1997, and MB were already beginning to look like a club that would revive its fortunes. The project involved full-time education for all 4, as indeed it did for all academy players. Kawabata insisted that all his junior players completed their secondary education and had in place a backup career plan, should football not provide them with the life of luxury they dreamed of. Players who did not do their homework or failed exams would be ineligible for selection for the weekend's matches, and would be allocated private tutoring. The parents were also expected to be involved in all aspects of their offspring's development, taking part in language classes but also sharing their own language with other members of the club and its infrastructure, on the understanding that MB would soon return to the European fray and require linguistic ability to operate as ambassadors for the club. Inevitably perhaps, Sigurdsson and Vinclova had fewer problems linguistically at the start than Castro and Manzoni. Yet it was the latter two who were making more of an impact on the pitch. Both were given special dispensation to make their debuts with the B team while still only 15. When Castro hit 16 in March 1999, he was given a squad number with the first time after racking up 83 goals with the B team and becoming the scourge of opposing defenses. 3 months later, he sat his GCSEs and managed to pass 6 of them. Mazzoni was less successful and had to resit, meaning that he was not given a squad number. Sigurd-Tires' progress academically was notable, but the intervening time between signing and reaching the age at which he could sign professional terms had been less kind, and the other members of the group had advanced more quickly. He and his parents sat down with Kawabata to announce that his talents would be best served in the field of sports science and that he would like to explore that avenue rather than professional football. Kawabata thanked them for their openness and sincerity and offered to pay for the boys' university education. Years later he would return to MB as a fully qualified physio. Vaclova progressed at a slower pace too but was still deemed worthy of continuance in the B team before being loaned out to wear side stripes. Manzoni failed to get up to speed with his academic requirements and the club, much to its chagrin and with the chairman begging Kawabata to reconsider bending the rules, transferred him to Milan Blue Stripes for £3 million before he had even played professionally. Castro then moved on to the fringes of the first team and in August 1999, at the age of 16 years and 5 months, came on as a substitute against London Purple. He had only been on the pitch for 15 seconds when he received the ball from a throw-in and cut inside 2 defenders. Looking up in an instant, he latched onto the ball with alacrity, launched the ball into the top right-hand corner to become an instant legend. Competition was fierce for places up front but Castro still managed to make 18 appearances, although 12 as sub, and score 14 league goals as MB claimed the Premiership title for the first time. They also reached the Champions League final but were beaten by the team closest to Castro's father's heart, Madrid White, in a game that proved just one too many for the Merseysiders. Over the next 2 seasons, Castro's influence would increase as he became one of the top strikers in the league. MB repeated their league success 2 years later in 2002 with Castro scoring the goal that brought the title home, and, most notably, scoring the winner in the 92nd minute of the final of the Champions League against Manchester Red. His performances against Madrid White in the Champions League had led to continued interest for the Spaniards to acquire Castro's services. Kawabata was against such a high-profile move so soon, as he feared that he was not ready for the adulation that went hand in hand with being a superstar at one of the world's biggest clubs. At MB, they did things differently. Castro had also continued with his education and achieved some impressive A-level results. In September of 2002, he enrolled in Liverpool University to do a degree in Hispanic Studies and received praise from sports and non-sports commentators alike. As part of his contract at MB, he was also heavily involved in community programs and donated 66% of his salary to charitable endeavors, claiming that if his family had managed for decades on a pittance, a third of $25,000 a week would be more than enough for them to live comfortably. He personally oversaw the projects his money was used for, creating sports and learning facilities for children in underprivileged areas in Liverpool, adding an adult education centre to John Moores University that allowed for people who had been forced to abandon education at an early age to retake steps to learning. He had plans and more plans, but his head had been turned. He was persuaded to stay for the next season and then review his situation. However, 2002-03 was less successful for MB as they crashed out of the group stages of the Champions League and could only finish 5th in the Premiership. Castro received an offer from Madrid White for £53 million and neither side was in a position to refuse. Whilst he was undoubtedly a star at MB, his move to the Whites converted him into something quite different, a level of adulation and devotion that he found quite difficult to assimilate. In the last season at MB, he saw the continued presence of his parents as an unnecessary force. He was now 21 and no longer needed mollycoddling. They were also insistent that he be shackled with the daughter of a friend of theirs and enter into marriage at a young age. Castro felt that he had missed out on part of his youth, and with his family firmly back in Seville, he decided to make up for lost time in the capital. He put his university career on hold and began to make plans. Plans that would have to wait his tenure with the Spanish national team across the border during Euro 2004. Castro had made several appearances already with La Roja and managed a brace on his debut in qualifying against Lithuania, with Vanclova in goal. Spain were highly fancied to do well in the tournament, when Castro got injured in training. He broke a small bone in his foot and would play no part in the tournament. Nor did he stay to watch it. He made hastily to Ibiza, where he began his recovery process. There he appeared on the pages of the Spanish press, but for reasons far removed from the footballing world that had formed his life until then. Uncompromising photos of him were smattered over the tabloids as he lounged in the company of model after model. The former sweetheart appeared in tears on the television as the wedding plans never got to chime. Madrid White sent a delegation over to control Castro, but it returned with little success, claiming that it was little more than hijinks and that he would be fit again soon. That was where he met Carmen Gopiquai, an actress-model-socialite who would not exert the most positive of influences over him. She did not mind his dalliances with other furtive souls. She had enough control over him from the outset to know that she would always have him coming back to her. The rest of the summer was a blur for Castro as MW tried to mop up the damaging images that caused him fame in Spain to rise. By the time he returned to Madrid, he weighed 11 kilos more than when he had left Liverpool and could still not place enough pressure on his right foot to run. His projected debut was set for October, but the board began to entertain the idea that the purchase had not been a success. Castro's rehab program was hindered by a larger problem, the Madrid nightlife. When he left MB, he promised to continue to contribute to the social programs in which he was involved in Liverpool, and open new ones, as his salary was now 4 times what he was on before. By September, he had reneged on both promises as Gopiquai convinced him that it was his money and that the scroungers can find another way to fund those wastes of time. A week later she introduced him to heroin after MW were warned of his cocaine use. The MW chairman decided enough was enough and took, in true Spanish fashion, the bull by the horns. Castro was called into the offices, he had still not been inside the Bernabeu as a MW player, and told to clean up his act or face legal action. Castro reacted to this infringement of his civil liberties by sitting in the middle of Madrid's Puerta del Sol with a bottle of cava, singing the songs of their rivals, Catalonia Free State Purple. When the inevitable fighting broke out, he was arrested and Gopegui came to bail him out. A delay with the paperwork meant she became irate and went to the ladies to calm down. There she was found with a needle hanging out of her arm after ODing. She would survive, but things would not get any easier. MW placed Castro in rehab and brought his parents to try and talk sense into him. MW accused MB of treating him like a baby, and so now, in the real world, he did not know how to react with all this newfound fame and fortune. This was laughed off by MB, but the tension between the clubs would always remain. Castro in rehab was only slightly better than on the outside. Underpaid orderlies were bribed €1,000 to bring in liquor and other goods as he sat through the life-enhancing sessions with a hangover before waiting for the lax night shift to come in and drink in peace. The information about Gopegui had been kept from him deliberately, making him believe that she had abandoned him and was shacked up with somebody else. When he discovered the truth, the blind eyes that were turned to allow him to continue with his vices were equally turned so that he could escape during the night. MW had a private detective at the hospital where she was recovering, and his abscondance was duly reported. More seriousness was needed on the part of the institution, but the first step was always going to be the player himself wanting to get better. Castro's decline from an elite footballer to a failed playboy in a matter of months caused concern throughout the footballing world. Other players tried to intervene. He was visited by Kawabata and several senior players from MB when they were drawn against Castro's side in the Champions League, but he refused to take their advice on board. Christmas came and went and he was in and out of rehab institutions. No progress was made either on or off the field. Castro was not even training and his weight suffered. The only good news from that time was his realization that Gopegui was not looking out for his best interests and their relationship came to an end. However, the downside of this was his continued desire to find a solution to his romantic failures in the bottle. One by one, his drinking partners also sought to flee as Castro's behavior became more and more erratic. Even those desperate to cling on to a famous and rich person who would pay for their drinks and buy their friendship began to lose patience. He was capable of snapping at any given time and with no forewarning, having to settle out of court on 2 occasions for breaking noses. MW's fans had now completely lost patience with him, meaning that he could no longer enjoy his pleasures in the bars and restaurants of the Spanish capital, no matter how upmarket these were. Someone would always take offense at his squandering of the club's money, and his own talent, and that would inevitably lead to an altercation. This meant that he would rely on deliveries from El Corte Inglés and partaking in his leisure time at home. He was technically injury-free, but as his first season was drawing to a close, it was clear that he was not going to play any part of it. MW made moves to have him return his cut of the transfer fee due to breach of contract. Whether the club intended that to act as a catalyst or not, that action, and him falling down the stairs at home, blind drunk and photographed by an unscrupulous house guest who sold the image to tabloids, but even these were tiring of him. Castro had a sort of epiphany in May 2005. A year wasted, he appeared on television seemingly repentant and ready to wave goodbye to the life that had overpowered him during his stay in the capital. It was hard to believe that the same man had won so much in just a short space of time in England, as he sat weighing 90 kilos and with an unkempt beard. He took his last drink on May 16, 2005 and began a much-needed period of temperance. And for a while things went well. He stayed off the drink and began to get his weight down. He returned to training and kicked a ball for the first time since before Euro 2004. He was slow and had lost technique, but he was on the way back, albeit very slowly. After a couple of weeks, he was able to train with the group. The group of players not yet granted holidays in an odd-numbered year with the season over. Castro renounced his summer holiday and promised to use the time to get to the same level of fitness that he was in before his injury. This went some way to placating the irate MW fans, though the majority of them preferred to reserve judgment until they could actually see some proof of his brag. By August, he was a different man. Well, he was the same man in his old guise, but most MW fans took that as being different. Now he needed match practice. On the training ground was all well and good, but any genuine return would need to be backed up by real performances. He began the 2005 to 2006 season in Madrid White Castile, effectively the B team. His debut came in the second game of the season and was modest. Even at this level, the third tier of Spanish football, his pace and stamina were lacking. That said, his touch and ability were far and away beyond the wildest dreams of most of the players on the park. There were reasons to be happy. Between August and September 2005 he played 7 games for the B team and scored 5 goals. He had been alcohol-free for months and seemed to warrant a shot at the first team. The manager informed him that he would be in the squad for the Champions League fixture in cold Norwegian City, and Castro celebrated only with grapefruit juice. It meant a lot to him, though was met with general derision in the press as he came onto the pitch as an 85th minute substitute with the game already won. He only had 1 touch, from a thrown-in, but had finally made his debut for MW. The next match was against third-place Valencia Beachy Coast, and the boss felt that was too big a game to risk him. So he returned to the B team with instructions to keep building up his fitness. His first game back was against Basque Strappers, who featured a particularly unpleasant left-back, Tsitsi Tekaro, who was the current beau of Castro's former firebrand, Gopegui. As they walked out, Tekaro whispered into Castro's ear, "Voy a terminar tu carrera," and 6 minutes into the game, a high tackle came in. A player just knows, they hear the crack and they know. That is that. The pain took a while to come, but when it did, it made up for lost time. It was a broken leg, whether it was a clean one or not, it was hard to tell at that juncture. What it did represent was another setback to Castro's return. The camera crews were on hand to film him leaving the hospital, unable to make a statement as the tears filled his eyes and his tongue seemed to grow, thereby preventing any articulate sound from being released. He returned home with his parents and pondered the long recuperation process. He finally made a statement in which he exonerated Tekuro from blame, stating that everything that had befallen him was his own doing and that he deserved this after the way he had abused his privilege. Like any addict, the ease with which he switched favored substance was astounding. The painkillers he had been given for the more unbearable moments were washed down like sweets. Soon, after their effect was limited, they were washed down wine. Just one, maybe two, to start with. He convinced his parents he could control it. He had been through a lot, he needed to unwind. He could barely smile as these lies exited his mouth. As they slept, he opened another bottle. This continued for a while. He managed to, once again, convince his parents, and the club, by working in the gym during the day, and knowing how much he could drink during the night. He viewed the subject scientifically, finding the best way to make his body do the necessary to fulfill his requirements. After a while, this was not even enough and Castro was soon looking for other outlets. Gopegui returned and once again proceeded to cause major disruption to his life, evicting his parents and easing his pain, first with opiates, then morphine, then heroin. Whilst he was out cold, she would try to bend the leg he had broken so that recovery was further hindered. She also made use of advancements in online banking to transfer his money to her account, on the proviso that MW would soon take him to court and try to recoup the vast amount prodigalized on him. Castro was alone. He was worse than alone, because she was with him. She made no attempts to hide what she was doing, even telling him to his face that she was worsening his injury so that he would never play again. He phoned his mum and begged for help. In the meantime, he was going to show the world the truth about her. He made his way to the Madrid neighborhood of Lavapiés and did a deal to purchase a revolver and organize some sort of live stream that he could broadcast from his car. We may have become somewhat spoiled in recent times with the ease of broadcasting any type of event to millions just with our phones, but even 11 years ago, an action of this magnitude required hefty equipment operated by professionals. This meant someone riding in the car with him, but they would be well paid, and if they were flogging weapons in Madrid backstreets, they were unlikely to be at the overly moral edge of society. Castro's plan was to get her into the car on the pretext of scoring. His days of scoring on the park now only involved little plastic bags punted by sketchy-looking characters, when he would pull the gun on her and get her to confess. It was not a great plan, but he did not have a better one. He could not drive due to the leg injury, so she would have to do it. That would mean she would have to be relatively sober for long enough to drive and articulate. He pretended to take the entire stash so that she had leeway to give him a telling off in the vehicle. She did not seem to care about the other occupant holding a laptop in the car as they drove off. When they got a couple of kilometers away from the Castro residence, the guy in the back gave the nod and they were on air. The audience was limited, there was no social media, or at least not as we know it now, for the flames to be fanned in a matter of seconds. This document would be reviewed and reviewed at a later date by most people. Castro extracted the gun. She caught a glimpse of him out of the corner of her eye. "What's that?" she asked. "Confess." He responded. "Confess to what?" she retorted. "To everything. What you have done." Castro said. "You don't have the guts. Put the gun away and let's get high." She saw through his obvious pretense, but Castro was riled. He moved the gun away from her temple and shot through the driver's window. Now he had her attention. "Chill, man. This is me. Come on. We're in this together." She looked at him and pleaded. "Keep your eyes on the road," he commanded. "Man. Everything I did was to get you better. I love you. You know that. Don't do this. We're good together. She pleaded, but her gaze remained straight. He shot through the empty window once again. I'm serious. I don't care if you crash. Confess. Okay. I confess. Happy. She hoped that would be enough. Confess properly. Explain what you did. He demanded. I drugged you. I stole your money. I have no intentions of absconding with you, as I'm hooking up with Tekuro once you are ruined. You were such an easy target. It hasn't even been fun. You're a boring drunk and a pointless junkie. You'll never play again, I've made sure of that. Why don't you run back to mummy and daddy and try and get clean in your shitty little village? She seemed to be enjoying herself now. This was not going as well as he had hoped. What if I shoot you? That will scupper your plans. Now it seemed like him who was begging. Wouldn't do yours much good either. Premeditated murder. You willing to do 25 years for me? She started to laugh. The guy in the back had had enough. I'm out, man. Let me out here, keep the laptop. He said. Nobody is going anywhere until she confesses and apologizes. Castro retorted. I'm really sorry. Sorry I didn't think to pull the gun on you, you pathetic loser. Her laughing became more intense, taking on a haunting and piercing quality. Stop. He ordered. She laughed more. Stop. He was crying. Shoot yourself and do society a favor. She responded. Stop. He knew it was pointless. Hey Blondie, let me out here. The guy in the back wanted out. Castro knew he was defeated and cocked the gun one last time. Go on then, big man. Her laughter unceasing. Castro pulled the trigger but nothing happened. She laughed more and smiled at him, unbuckling his seat belt as he inspected the empty chamber. He had only been given 2 bullets. She stopped laughing to say good night, Castro. Hitting the accelerator, she took the sporty vehicle well past 100 kilometers per hour and began to swerve so that the impact against the post would be on Castro's side. In the frantic final seconds, he realized she had removed his seat belt and tried desperately to put it on once more, but in vain. Impact caused the car to jolt and Castro was thrown through the windscreen to his death. The guy in the back suffered head injuries against Castro's seat that would leave him in a coma. Gopegui walked away from the crash unscathed and phoned the authorities. When the ambulance came, it was accompanied by a number of police cars, and, following the medical examination, she was duly arrested. In the police station she saw the playback of the live stream and was asked if she had anything to add. She said that she didn't and was charged. Castro's attempt at revenge failed miserably and led to his club severing all links with the player, cutting their losses and trying to move on. Footballing society shunned him, his parents were hounded out of their village and forced to find a new life abroad. Short of money, their only means of supplementing their meager income was by selling their part of the story to the tabloids and writing a dreadful yet money-spinning account. His funeral was attended by just the parents and a couple of family members, his cousin Mar included, who often wondered what might have happened if he had refused MB's offer. As the coffin was lowered into the crematorium, a further attendee appeared, an older Japanese gentleman who offered his condolences.